Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We have just completed opening day, played out the game in our last episode, and we lost to the Pirates 8-6. So we thought our offense was going to be better than it was a year ago when we were second in the National League with runs scored. And with 6 runs on opening day, I think it's early sign that perhaps our offense will be better than it was a year ago. Unfortunately, with our ace from last season, Chris Sabatka, on the IL for another 3 months most likely, and no real significant changes to our pitching staff this past offseason, it is reasonable to perhaps assume that our pitching staff, which was number 1 in the National League in runs allowed last year, will be somewhat worse this year. And certainly giving 8 runs up on opening day indicates that for one day at least that was the case. Clearly a very small sample size. Clearly we're not going to get worried about one loss on opening day. As Patrick DeBonis notes frequently, when we win on opening day, we've just jinxed our season. So hopefully in this case, a loss on opening day will have us set up to finally make a trip to the World Series with this Buffalo team in our 9th season as GM/manager. And a few days into the season, we're 2-2. We've got some good news and we've got some bad news. The good news is, as I mentioned in the last episode, we re-scouted Juan Estrada coming off of his injury that cost him most of last season, and his stamina has just been all over the place. But this time they claim it's a 50, but he was 55-60 before the injury. He came back from the injury and coming out of spring training, the first time I had kind of looked at him real closely, it was a 35, and I thought, oh my God, we're going to have to move this guy out of the rotation. But I don't know if any of you have ever seen such volatility in ratings like stamina. It definitely can move up and down over time in his player's age. But I've never seen something where in a period of like 6 months, particularly with a player who was, I guess maybe because he was coming off an injury, maybe that had something to do with it. But like I said, I think it was 55-60 before, then he went down to 35, and now our scout thinks he's a 50. I don't think it should be that confusing. I don't think Estrada is ever going to be an ace pitcher for us, but he is an important kind of 3 or 4 starter for us. And with that 50 stamina, I feel like he can hit that role or fill that role well for us. And he's also a somewhat important bat for us in the lineup as well. So that's the good news. The bad news is that another starter, Jarlin Susana, rotator cuff inflammation and going to be out for about 3 months. So this one, on top of losing Sobotka, is a pretty big hit. Susana tied for the National League lead in wins in 2031. Sobotka tied for the National League in wins in both 2032 and 2033. And now both of those proven effective veteran starting pitchers are on the IL for the next 3 months. So that certainly potentially accelerates our need to bring another pitcher on board. We've got plenty of good, solid starters now, so I'm not worried from that perspective. I just don't know if we have the top of the rotation guys other than Sincere Shazier. I feel like we've got a lot of 4th and 5th starters, which is fine for the 4th and 5th starter in your rotation, but we also need a 2 and a 3. So we're going to continue to try to speak with some other teams about potentially trading for some of their big pitchers. As we've talked about in previous episodes, the price, given our trade settings for a true top-of-the-line pitcher, is just absolutely off the charts. Haven't been able to make a deal, even though we've been looking for seasons at this point. But certainly our need right now is as high as it's ever been, with both Sabatka and Susanna on the IL till likely July in a best case scenario. And we are going to give Jorge Carrillo another chance to start at least over the next potentially 3 months. Probably won't be that long a leash if he's ineffective, but Carrillo still has a profile that should be a bit above average for a starting pitcher. He completely flamed out a few seasons ago when we gave him 10 starts at the beginning of the season. I think his ERA was somewhere in the 7s over those 10 starts, and then he was pretty effective in our bullpen the rest of the season after that. Before we had started that ill-fated adventure with him as a starter, he had been very effective as a reliever his first year and a half with us. He's been less effective over the last year plus at this point, although in his defense, he did pitch a league-high 84 games last year with a more than strikeout per inning and a SIERA that's 80-some-odd points below his ERA. So he had a respectable season for us last year despite the 4-9 record. But particularly with the fact that he's now 28 years old and the fact that we have two pitchers that are older than him in Susanna and Sabatka, both on the injured list, would be helpful, I think, at this point, one way or another, to figure out whether Carrillo can potentially be in our long-term plans as a starter. At the very least, I think he's a good, solid reliever. But if he fails in this opportunity, let's say we'll probably give him at least 6, 7, 8 games as a starter before potentially moving on and doing something else. If he fails in this second opportunity as a starter, as a 28-year-old, probably time for us to just acknowledge that he is a reliever. We did bring up Max Meyer from AAA, a guy that we signed midway through last year to a minor league contract after he was released by the Padres. Spent the end of last season with us in Albany, and he was a pretty good insurance policy for us to have down there. Not a great reliever, but certainly someone solid who should be able to help our bullpen over the next few weeks. And as I had mentioned, we had been looking for trades of starters since the start of the season, and we were in no way with Atlanta looking for a potentially really solid young potential ace, but we also had to spend just a ridiculous amount to get to the almost point, including Arturo Flores, the top prospect in our system, Dave Zapp, a big-time prospect, Tim Gaglia, big-time prospect, Crochet, several minor leaguers, and Sabatka, our ace, who's injured. And then we still needed to add in a big player to get Amari Mohead, who certainly is a very interesting 25-year-old pitcher. 5 excellent pitches, really good stamina, great at holding runners, good personality, and his stuff and movement are well above average, and his control is above average. So I'd love to add him to the team. But we are giving up our ace. Granted, it's an ace who is injured and whose ratings just kind of cratered this offseason. He's not 30 yet, but since last October, he's lost 10 points in his movement and 5 points in his control. I guess saying his ratings have cratered is a bit of hyperbole by me, but his ratings are just very quickly trending in a negative direction. And this was even before he had suffered the injury that he needs to come back from. And his third pitch, his splitter, has always been borderline. But he's had great success as a starter. 32-14 record in 2 seasons since he came over to us in that big trade with the Dodgers. And he was the runner-up for the NL Cy Young Award last year. So he's obviously still a pitcher with a fair amount of value. That said, Mohead is younger, cheaper for the time being, although he's going to be having a big contract going forward. But certainly a better overall profile with a 5-pitch arsenal. And plus stuff, movement, and control, and being younger. So clearly you'd want to trade Sabatka for him, especially with Sabatka coming off an injury. But Arturo Flores is the number 80 prospect in baseball, one of the best prospects in our system. Former international free agent signing, great personality, captain, durable. Looks like he could be a DH or a first baseman for us in a few years. Dave Zapf is the former number 5 overall pick who's made it up to AAA this year, hitting .280 with a couple of homers and 3 doubles in his first 25 at-bats. Very small sample size, but certainly has the profile of a good major league outfielder. And then Tim Gaglia, another first-round pick, he from 2029, who hit .311 at the end of last year in Albany in 135 at-bats and is hitting .348 in the early stages of the season this year there. Really good speed, really good defensive outfielder, and a pretty darn good hitter, potentially. Going to knock a lot of extra base hits around, contact a little above average, not going to strike out much, and enough home run power to at least be a respectable threat. Giving up those 3 pretty good prospects and our ace, and needing to add in another big-time player, just seems too much to me. So we were also trying to get a lesser pitcher from Nashville. And we've come back to Nashville, and I'm kind of shocked. I don't know if... I'm sure this has happened to me before, but usually you submit an offer, and they just tell you no, or we will get back to you in a day or two, and then we get a no way or an almost. But I just submitted the trade offer to them, and they said accepted. And it is a volume trade because we're trying to get them to retain a good chunk of a contract of a player who is good but not great. We still have to get up our ace, Sabatka, who, if healthy and what he's been in the past, is the best player in this deal. I just question with the fact that his movement and his control have been trending in the wrong direction over the last several months. And now he's out with shoulder inflammation. And his 3rd pitch is borderline anyways. I question what he's going to be when he comes back. And we have to give up Sabatka. We have to give up Max Meyer, who we just talked about, who we just brought up to the majors. Not bad value for us if we can use him to help get a decent player, and he's a guy that we picked up as a minor league free agent, but still obviously a useful major league reliever. He did not have great luck his first stint in Buffalo back in 2026 when he had a 4.77 ERA and a 1.37 WHIP for us. But still certainly a useful major league reliever. And then we also have to give in some organizational depth in the outfield. And then one interesting-ish prospect in Ernesto Del Bosque. He's durable, a scouting discovery, has the stamina to start, has a potential 3 to 4 pitch arsenal. The issue is that he just has almost no movement on his pitches right now. His stuff and his control and his 3 to 4 pitch arsenal all suggest he could be a useful major league starter. He's got the stamina to start. He is a finesse pitcher. But unless that movement on his pitches gets better, he's just going to give up a wacky number of home runs. So I don't mind giving him up. He's only 19 years old, and we just promoted him out of the complex to the DSL, where he hasn't even pitched yet because the season hasn't started. And then, as I said, there's some non-prospects and some veterans in the deal who are in our minor league system, basically to get them to potentially retain a good chunk of his contract, 40%. And the pitcher that we will get in return is Drake Purvis, a 28-year-old who is signed to a contract for the next several seasons, going to be paying him as much as $16 million a year. Now, granted, as we've talked about, we're potentially getting Nashville to hold on to 40% of that, which helps make his number somewhat more palatable. He is a guy with plus stuff, plus movement, and plus control. And he is a guy with a 4-pitch arsenal of major league quality pitches, including an excellent curve and a above average fastball. He's got 55 stamina, 55 holding runners. He's not an ace, but he looks like a solid 3 starter. My big concern with him is he's a fly ball pitcher and he only throws in the low 90s, and he's 28 years old. This is as hard as he's going to throw. I don't love a pitcher who doesn't throw all that hard. He is a finesse pitcher, but not throwing that hard with those fly ball tendencies. He's given up 18 and 26 home runs at the major league level each of the last 2 years. And when we look at his major league career, he's a 115 ERA plus, a 95 FIP minus. He is a nice, solid 3rd or 4th starter. I worry about a guy who doesn't throw that hard and gives up a lot of fly balls. I worry about him in a big game and giving up the home runs. I don't love that over the course of his career he's a little bit above average, which is why I say he's a good, solid 3 or 4 starter. But he is healthy. We're getting the Stars to retain 40% of his contract. It really comes down to what Sobotka is. I mean, we'd give up Del Bosque, we'd give up Meyer in a second for him. The rest of these guys are filler, just trying to get them to retain some of a mediocre-ish contract. Sobotka, over the course of his career with a 108 ERA plus and a 92 FIP minus, looks similar-ish. But his 2 years in Buffalo, 134 ERA plus, 83 FIP minus, we seem to have kind of straightened him out. I mean, he's got almost as much WAR in 2 seasons with us as he did have in parts of 5 seasons with the Dodgers. So he's become a really good pitcher since he came to Buffalo. And if he performs the way he has the last 2 seasons, he's the most valuable player in this deal. My question is just what he's going to look like on the other side of this injury, with the fact that his ratings have started deteriorating over the last 6 months at this point. And Sobotka, is nearing the end of that contract he signed with the Dodgers before we had traded for him. So not making a crazy amount of money. If he's a number 1 starter or a number 2 starter like he's been for us in the 2 years we've had him, he's a great bargain. But if he comes back from this injury and he's a 4 or a 5 starter, or worse, a borderline starter reliever, then $9 million next year is not great. So with Sobotka and Susana on the IL, there's a part of me that just wants a good, solid major league arm, which I think we're getting in Drake Purvis. But even with the Stars retaining 40% of that $6.4 million contract, we're going to be paying him about $10 million a year in his early 30s, which if he's a 3, if he's a good 3 for us, it's fine. But if he ends up as a 5th starter, it's not that great. But I am really worried about what Sobotka is going to look like at the age of 30, coming off of this shoulder injury, with his ratings already trending in the wrong direction, in a third pitch that's already marginal, and who knows what it's going to look like on the other side of that injury. This isn't giving us the ace that we've been looking for. It's just giving us a nice solid arm to help get us through this season and hopefully several seasons to come. And it seems crazy to be trading away who's a guy who's our number one and who's led the National League in wins both of the seasons he's been with us, and just basically give up on him so quickly. But he's a key guy to getting this trade done, so he clearly still has some value now. And I don't know what kind of value he's going to have coming off of that injury. So I'm going to go ahead and complete the trade. Sobotka is gone. The fans are angry. We've got another major league pitcher with Purvis. Got a spot right in the rotation for him, because even though Sobotka was on the IL, or a spot on the roster for him, because even though Sobotka was on the IL, we did have Meyer, who we had to trade, involved in the Meyer was on the major league roster and he was in the trade. I don't know why that is so difficult for me to articulate. And I'm probably going to make Drake Purvis really angry with this. He's going to be in our rotation at some point this year, but I kind of want to see what these young guys can do. I guess I could move Painter to the bullpen. I think I may do that. Painter 2 years ago was so good in the bullpen for us. He was fine last year, 9-9, 3.55 ERA. But he put together a higher WAR in 143 innings out of the bullpen 2 years ago than he did in 182 and 2/3 innings as a starter last year. By the time we get to September, it's very conceivable to me that both Painter and Purvis will be back in the rotation. But I really want to see what the youngsters, Shazier, Estrada, Ochoa, and Carrillo can do. We kind of got to figure out, we think we've got, I don't want to say a potential ace, but a potential great number 2 in Shazier, based on what he did for us last year when he was making his major league debut. He had a crappy start on opening day. That happens, but I'm not really worried about him. But Estrada coming off of an injury, Ochoa, who has started 2 major league games in his career at this point, and Carrillo, who flamed out after starting 10 games for us a couple years ago. I want to figure out, do we have 0, 1, 2, or 3 solid major league starters among that bunch? I feel pretty confident we have at least 1. I feel like Estrada is going to be a solid, competent major league starter. But I'm not sure about Ochoa and Carrillo, and I'd like to find out. So we are actually going to put Purvis into the rotation and let Painter work out of the pen for us for a while. We know what he is as a major league pitcher. He's a good, solid 3 or 4 pitcher. The other guys, let's find out. And it's been a kind of choppy start to the season. We were 2-2 when we last checked in and made the trade. Lost 3 in a row, home against the Phillies, to fall to 2-5. Fortunately, we were dominant in New York, taking 3 against the Mets, and then back home we took 3 against the Yankees. So we've won 6 in a row, and our record stands at 8-5 here in the middle of April. So things have stabilized a bit. Purvis may get to pitch against his old team, home against Nashville, home against the Royals, and then we will finish off the month with games in Seattle and then a series against the Braves in Atlanta. And our young pitcher, Juan Estrada, fortunately it wasn't a more serious injury than he ended up, a freak off-field accident, but only going to be out for about 4 days after he fell off the back of a pickup truck. And we've made it to the end of April. Things have gone pretty well. 16-9 record. So after the 2 major pitching injuries, one in spring training to Sabatka, and then on his first start of the year to Susana, we've still bounced back reasonably well. Taking a look at the standings here, we are half a game behind Philadelphia in the East, but our 16-9 record clearly one of the best in baseball. There's a lot of teams playing really good ball at the start of this season, and then there's some teams that are absolutely horrible, with the Guardians, Expos, and Astros all playing below 300 ball, and the Dodgers not too far off that pace. So a lot of dispersion in the records of the teams in the early stages of this season. One thing that we know is a constant is that Deshaun Seifu is going to lead the National League in steals. He's got almost twice as many as Drew Jones or Ron Salyers here a month into the season with 19 already. Looks like he potentially could be putting up another really big stolen base season. It's been a while since he had those monster years with 199, his first 2 full years in the majors. But certainly 19 for 19 in the month of April suggests that he can probably at the very least get back into the 70s, where he hasn't been since he was 25 years old. And with a month in the books, it's a good time to check in on our big free agent acquisition. 7 years, $280 million, front-loaded a bit in this season. Shamar Jenneret, the reigning American League MVP, and he's off to a very good start with us, but not a great start. Hitting .287 with 7 home runs and 15 ribbies and 101 at-bats. Good for a 128 WRC plus, but that's actually a bit below his career average, certainly for the numbers that we are paying him. With 7 home runs through the first month of the season, looks like he's on pace to hit about 42 home runs. That's more than acceptable. But certainly expecting that over these next few years, especially in his late 20s and early 30s, we're going to have multiple seasons with a 150 or better WRC plus when all is said and done, in WARs in the 5, 6, 7 area. So he's not quite on the pace to doing what we hoped he might do for us and kind of expected he would do for us this year. But he's not having a horrible season either. Maybe it just took him a little while to adjust to the cold weather in Buffalo. And now that we are in May, hopefully there will be fewer real frigid days compared to what he was experiencing when he was playing his home games in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we've made it to mid-May. Team playing really well, 23-12 record. We are in first place now. The Phillies fading a bit. The Marlins are actually a game behind us in second. And with that .657 winning percentage, we've got the best record in the National League now. The pace of steals for Seifu has slowed down a bit. He's only stolen 2 through the first half of May, but still leading the league in steals. Looking at the rest of the leaderboards, nothing in terms of hitting, but Jorge Carrillo in that trial as a starter is doing much better than he did for us a few seasons ago. 5-1 record and a 1.78 ERA, which is the second best in the National League. If you were looking closely, I think when we came here, you'll see that Juan Estrada is got a strained back, gonna put him day to day for 1 to 2 weeks. Does have a minimal impact on hitting and throwing, a moderate impact on running. He is coming off of the injury that cost him the last 4 months of last season in the playoffs. 3-1 with a 2.81 ERA for us as a starting pitcher. Taking a look at his batting stats, hitting just 273. Still has yet to hit a major league home run. Has walked 14 times in 22 games. So he's been an above average offensive player as well. We're not going to mess around, though. We've got the best record in the NL. Things are stabilized a little bit with the trade of Sabatka. We really just have one starting pitcher on the IL now in Susana. We've got plenty of depth to get us another starting pitcher for the next couple of weeks. We know that we've got Andrew Painter in the bullpen for us right now, who would be an easy add. So we're going to play things conservatively with Juan Estrada, and we are going to put him on to the injured list. Let's make sure that he is 100% before we bring him back. And I'm feeling a little better about putting Juan Estrada on the IL and being conservative with him because we just heard word that his recovery time frame is unclear. Still could be another week or two till he's ready to go back. So think it was probably smart to play things as conservative as possible with him, given the injury that he was coming off of last year and his importance to us for the long term as a potentially very impactful two-way player for us. And we're closing in on the end of May, 37-14 record. So obviously an incredible season thus far for our Buffalo Wings. We are up 8.5 on the Pirates, 9 on the Mets and the Marlins, 9-1 in our last 10 with 9 wins in a row. So things going incredibly well. Seifu's still leading the National League with 31 steals. Last year's Rookie of the Year, Mike Heiner, is leading the National League in batter war at this point. Jorge Carrillo remains outstanding in his second shot to join our rotation, 8-1 with a league best 1.53 ERA, tied for the league lead with a few others with 8 wins. So that's what's going well, pretty much everything. And some good news in that Juan Estrada is now back and healthy. We do have Cam Collier, our starting third baseman, on the IL now. He's been there for about 4 days at this point, but not a major issue there, hopefully. With Estrada coming back, might as well take a quick look at how the pitching has been going. Bryce Miller, with a 0.44 ERA and 15 saves, is doing a good job holding on to that closer role. We brought in Lauren Walborn in that trade with the Dodgers. He's been excellent for us as a high-volume stopper. Already pitched 47 1/3 innings with a 1.71 ERA. Vallejo, Yenger, Wenzel, all doing fine. Franklin Heel, David Aranya, who we brought up with the last injury to Estrada, and Sean Sullivan, somewhat less impressive at a very high level in terms of their stats. Sincere Shazier, 7-2 with a 3.53 ERA. He has settled down since that first start, doing pretty well for us. Correa, we've talked about, doing great. Painter has been good in a mix of starts and work out of the bullpen. The issues have been Purvis, who we traded for, and Ochoa. Given that Purvis is a proven major league pitcher at this point, we are going to keep him in the rotation. We are going to demote Isidro Ochoa to the bullpen. Maybe he can get himself straightened out. He started 10 games for us now this year, 3-2 record, but that 5.05 ERA is not great. The BABIP of 368 indicates that he's probably gotten somewhat unlucky. His Sierra also indicates that, and so does his excellent FIP minus. But we'll move him to the pen, take him out of the pressure of the rotation. Purvis had a really bad start in his first start with Nashville, which impacts his stats a bit, but still 3-4 with a 5.64 ERA for us in Buffalo. It's not what we were expecting when we traded away Sabatka for him, but for the time being, we're going to move Ochoa into the bullpen. Maybe it's just similar to what happened with Carrillo a few years ago, and he needs to mature a little bit. We do think that he still has some growth in a few of his pitches as well as in his overall stuff, and maybe a little less pressure on him to try to develop working as a middle reliever out of the pen for us with Estrada coming back. And as the month of June begins, we've now won 11 in a row. 736 winning percentages at 39-14. Best record in baseball. 9 games up on the Mets in the division. So things going really well for our Buffalo Wings. Taking a look at the team statistics here a couple months into the season. An excellent month followed by an incredible 23-5 May record with those 11 wins in a row that we mentioned. We're 3 games above Pythagorean expectations, ranking 3rd in the National League in runs scored right now, so a step behind where we were a year ago, but we're now 6th in home runs, so adding Mr. Generette into the lineup, as well as some of the youth that we've brought up, seems to be helping us in that regard. And we are in the top 6 in every batting category in the National League, except for base running, where we're a bit below average. Pitching staff still excellent. We were number 1 in runs allowed last year, and despite those injuries that we've talked about this year, we're number 1 in runs allowed as well, in the top half of the league in every pitching category except for strikeouts, where we rank 10th, and our defense has been respectable as well. So certainly a very nice start to this 2034 season for our Buffalo Wings. And we've won our first 3 games of June to extend the winning streak to 14 games. And I mentioned we were hitting more home runs thanks in part to Generette. He was just named the National League Player of the Week. 463 average with 6 home runs and 14 ribbies. For the season now here on June 5th, hitting .312 with 18 home runs, 43 runs driven in. He's got that WRC plus up to 158, and he's got the WAR close to 2. So he has clearly been hitting the ball pretty hard and knocking it over the fence with some regularity in May and June, as our Wings have gotten on a extremely hot streak here. And it seems as if our Wings may never lose again. We just completed the homestand, sweeping the Pirates, only allowing them 6 runs in 3 games. So as we stand here on June 9th, 17 consecutive wins for the Buffalo Wings, 10.5 up on the Mets. Got to be pretty frustrating for the Mets. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and they've still lost 2 games to us in the standings. Heiner, 3rd in the National League in hitting. Generette, 2nd in homers. Seifu leading in steals. Heiner still leading in batter war. Tim Hall's got a 15-game hitting streak going. Carrillo still leading the league in ERA and wins. So it's been a pretty monstrous season so far for our Buffalo Wings. Cam Collier ready to come off of the injured list for us now, so that should help as well. And this season has been real, and it has been spectacular so far. And the second place Mets finally ended our winning streak at 17. They took 2 out of 3 against us at Citi Field. We're back home now for games against Atlanta and Miami before we go on the road against Chicago ahead of the first-year player draft. So looking forward to reviewing the highlights of the potential draft class shortly. It's not nearly as deep in terms of the top end depth as some of the last 2 or 3 drafts that we've had, where it seems like there's just been a crazy amount of talent, but glad to see that there is a little variance among the draft classes from year to year. Makes things more interesting. The Mets now 9.5 behind us after taking 2 out of 3 against us in that series in Queens. And things are just going stupid good for our Buffalo Wings after we lost those 2 to the Mets. We've now won 7 in a row after taking the last game against the Mets and then sweeping the Braves and the Marlins. So we've got a couple games against the White Sox before we get to the draft. Did have a minor injury that just occurred. The young reliever, Yohane Varejo, going to be out for a couple weeks with elbow inflammation. 3.29 ERA with 19 strikeouts and 13 2/3 innings. With the embarrassment of riches we have in our bullpen, and quite honestly across our whole team this year with the 52-16 record, haven't been able to get him out on the mound and get a ton of innings from him, but he has been reasonably productive when we have used him on the mound. But he'll be out for a couple weeks at this point. Hopefully we will have him back before the All-Star break. And we made it to draft day. We won the first 2 in home against Chicago, 4-2 and 13-0. So we've won 9 in a row after we had that 17-game winning streak that was interrupted just by the 2 losses to the Mets. So it has been a wild season, 54-16, 771 winning percentage. Pretty much just about any record in sight seems possible for the Buffalo Wings this year, with a 12.5 game lead as we approach the midway point in the season. Jenneret tied for second in homers, tied for second in ribbies, Seifu leading in steals. Heiner and Jenneret are 2-3 in OPS. Heiner still leading the league in batter WAR. Jorge Carrillo still leading the league in wins and ERA. And it's just been a fantastic start to the season for our Buffalo Wings. Turning our attention to the rookie draft, which is today, we will be drafting last, 35th in the first round. So it's unlikely that a lot of these players, probably unlikely that any of these top prospects that we're going to highlight will be around for us at number 35. There's only 3 4.5-star or higher potential pitchers in the draft, highlighted by Jake Bleimeister, a 21-year-old out of North Carolina. Like the work ethic, good stamina, great at holding runners, throws in the mid to high 90s. His stuff could potentially be off the charts. He's already got 3 major league or better pitches at this point. His movement looks like it's going to be great. Only question is how good his control is going to be. He's been facing great competition at UNC. Certainly looks like a very interesting prospect. Can almost guarantee we won't have a shot at him at number 35. Andy Bivens is a reliever. Looks like he could be a nice, solid reliever. I guess it's conceivable that he will be available with the 35th pick in the draft. I don't know if we would go with a reliever in the first round or not. And then Jared Clayfin, 17-year-old starting pitcher. Not great at holding runners, decent stamina, normal injury proneness. He's lost 1 game over his 4-year high school career, hasn't lost since he was a freshman. Looks like he could have a 4-pitch arsenal at the major league level of above average pitches, and his stuff, movement, and control all could be well above average if he completely develops. Certainly looks like a interesting prospect. Also, several more pitchers who are 4-star prospects. We'll just take a look at the 3 that look like they could be starters. Tony Corum, like the work ethic. Certainly looks like if that changeup develops, he's got a nice three-pitch arsenal. If not, he's probably an excellent reliever. Tim Stowers, 18-year-old. Don't love the low work ethic and intelligence, but he's an 18-year-old who throws in the mid to high 90s. Potentially has a three-pitch major league arsenal. Looking for a decent amount of money. It's not inconceivable to me that he could be around with some of those personality flaws for us to consider at number 35. And then Ron Whitmer, but a bit more developed prospect, college player out of Loyola Marymount. Certainly has the stamina to start, real good at holding runners. Potential four-pitch arsenal. He actually looks like a pretty high floor pitcher. I doubt he's going to be around at number 35, but he looks like a guy who's got a pretty good chance of being a solid 4, maybe even a 3 starter in the majors for many years to come. Extreme ground ball tendencies, throws in the mid to high 90s, good movement on his pitches. Certainly, if he's around at 35, he would be an extremely interesting prospect for us to think about. And those of you who have been waiting for me to say things like extremely interesting, young, optimal, take a drink. And taking a look at the top 10 batters, we got 5 5-star potential and 5 4.5-star potential players that we see according to our scout. Probably unlikely any of these 10 are going to make it to us, but we'll take a look at the top of the list anyways. So if you've got thoughts on who we should or should not go after that might be available, always helpful to hear what you're thinking. Center fielder Luis Comadran out of Azusa Pacific University. Durable injury proneness. He's got the worst personality possible with, obviously he could be worse if he was negative on all 6 things, but the 3 traits I care about the most, leadership, work ethic, and intelligence, he is below average in all of those. But he's a durable guy, pretty good outfield range, excellent sacrifice bunter, and certainly looks like he could have a well above average major league bat. Feel a little more comfortable potentially taking someone with work ethic issues who's already pretty developed, but certainly a lot of his value is going to potentially come from getting that home run power up closer to 65 than the 35 it is today. So no guarantee he's going to hit for a ton of power in the majors. Josh Connors, first baseman, looks like a lot of the international amateur free agent prospects we've seen in recent years. Not much speed, not much defensively, only a fair competition level, even though he's a college player out of the University of Jamestown. Looks like he could be a interesting-ish major league hitter, but certainly not great. It's not inconceivable that he could fall to us as a college guy looking for $10 million. Josh Farwick, center fielder, decent range out there, like the work ethic, like the durability, potentially interesting bat. Chad Ferrigno, Lou Ferrigno's at this point in 2034, what would he be? Probably a great-grandson of Lou Ferrigno? Who knows? Anywho, not a ton of speed, doesn't bring much defensively, but a fully developed bat that's 80 contact and 75 home run power with durability is certainly a potentially very valuable asset. Marquez Polite, real interesting player here. He's almost similar to Deshaun Seifu, except he's got the ability to draw walks, even though he'll strike out more, but potentially excellent contact, gap power, and ability to draw walks. Not going to hit many home runs, great speed, good personality overall. Not the most talented player defensively. Could play left field, but interesting prospect. And then there's the 4.5 star prospects. Edgar Higgins, left fielder, another guy with an interesting bat, pretty generic corner outfielder. Luis Morales, a shortstop. Not really a shortstop, but the versatility to play multiple positions in the infield, can also play multiple positions in the outfield, so there's some value there. Has a little bit of speed, good bunter, potentially a very interesting bat if he fully developed. I don't think he'll be there for us at number 35, but would certainly consider him. Dan Repetto, a third baseman, like the durability, kind of meh on him defensively. If he fully develops, he's a decent major league bat, but not incredibly exciting to me. Dave Shreve, Chasen Shreve's son, perhaps. Durable, decent defensively in the outfield. Could definitely be a pretty solid left fielder. Potentially interesting bat if he completely develops. And last but not least, Brendan Teddy, 19-year-old, like the high work ethic, like the durability, the bat similar to a lot of the bats that we've seen, even among these 4.5 and 5-star prospects. A decent major league bat if fully developed, but certainly not exceptional. So I feel like the quality of this draft is somewhat lower in terms of the top end prospects than what we've seen, at least in the last two drafts, which have both seemed pretty strong to me, particularly last year's at the top. So who knows who we're going to see at number 35 in our next episode. Maybe a player or two that we looked at that slide through. I have a feeling if they are, they're probably the players that we'd be less interested in. Obviously, we'll spend a lot of time digging into some of the lower regarded prospects, at least according to our scout, before making a decision, and we'll walk through our thought process in our next episode. Until then, it's been a fantastic year for Buffalo, 54-16 through 70 games, and just a matter of trying to keep this runaway freight train on the tracks, hopefully avoid any serious injuries. Susana looks like he's only 4 days away from being able to begin a rehab assignment, so he's recovered potentially a little more quickly than they would have hoped. Vallejo still going to be out for close to 2 weeks. We wanted to be conservative with him. I think that we're going to be very conservative with any potential injuries that we have, as certainly no guarantees that we're going to run away with the NL East, but we feel like we've got enough of a cushion in the standings that we don't want to risk any long-term injuries. So anytime someone is questionable as to whether we should put them on the IL, we are probably going to just put them on the IL over the next few months and try to ensure that we don't let minor injuries or short-term injuries become major and or long-term injuries. But before we even think about any more injuries, we're going to be doing the draft, and we will tackle that at the top of our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.